It's hard for me to follow sometimes. You're zipping through the Marmakomo here, and I've got the screen over here. I'm trying to read it, and you're reading over there, and then it's like.
So we're starting a new topic, a new issue that has to do with kavod and oneg Shabbat. These are ways we honor and respect and also enjoy Shabbat. We're going to look at different aspects of this issue. And the first one is the issue of adding time onto Shabbat, adding time from Friday onto Shabbat. Let's start with this question. The Gemara in Rosh Hashanah Daf Tet Amud Aleph asks, "The mosifin michol al kodesh minalam." What is the Gemara's question? How do you understand the question? This question over here. Sorry, doctor?
Take it for granted that you do add on. That's the question.
Okay, and the question is?
Looking for a source.
For a source for what, exactly? Precisely for what?
For adding on from Chol al Kodesh. That's what it says.
For adding on?
To making the Kodesh longer.
Meaning extending the Kodesh of Shabbos to the previous day or the day after, right? So the question is, what is the source? How do we know?
You have to make some of the whole day Kodesh.
Okay, you have to.
That's what it's saying, huh?
Oh, so I'm just why am I pressing you on this? What are you saying, Rabbi Yoel? Let's are you disagreeing with us or with? Oh, sorry.
I want to say that the question is whether you have to or whether you may.
Correct. That's right. In other words, it sounded to me when I first saw the Gemara, I said, and I said, how do we know, presumably, Shabbos happens on Saturday, or beginning, let's say, sunset on Friday and ending at nightfall on Saturday, right? I'm using the Goyish words just because Shabbos doesn't exactly, right? Just to express.
Just use 6 p.m. Use 6 to 6 as a measure, and then we can move off of that for discussion.
Sure. Okay. So 6 to 6, or maybe 6:18, right? Now, so you could. When I first read the Gemara, I thought the question was, how do we know that it works? How can I decide Shabbos starts at 6 o'clock, right? How do I know that I can decide at 5:30 that it's already Shabbos? But it's not. Technically, it's not Shabbos. How do I know that's possible? Or Shabbos ends, right? Nightfall comes the next day, the following day. Before I do Havdalah, before I decide, before I announce that Shabbos is over, Shabbos just ended. The time is up, presumably, right? So how do I know that's possible? That's how I understood the question. I think you see from the Gemara that's not the way the Gemara understood this question, and we're gonna notice as we go along and pay attention at every turn. What are we talking about? Which one are we talking about? Must we or may we? Which is the discussion. So let's start from Rabbi Akiva, the Tanya. בחריש וקציר תשבות, רבי עקיבא אומר, אינו צריך לומר חריש וקציר של שביעית, שהרי כבר נאמר שדך לא תזרע, אלא חריש של ערב שביעית הנכנס לשביעית, וקציר של שביעית היוצא למוצאי שביעית. Now, so Rabbi Akiva is talking about, it brings the proof from Shemitah. But what is he proving exactly? He's proving that, it says twice, the Torah mentions twice, plowing, right? So what plowing is prohibited? One plowing is prohibited is on during the Shemitah. The other is the plowing that prepares for the Shemitah, right? Very similar to Shvitat Kelim, right? Very similar to the idea that I'm not allowed to do something on Friday if it will continue happening on Shabbos. The obvious difference is that the subject on Shemitah is the land, as opposed to the subject on Shabbos is the people, right? So that granted, I'm not saying that it's not a fair comparison. I'm just saying, if you'd want to compare this, it would be work I do on Friday that goes into Shabbat, right? Work I do during the 6th year that goes into Shemitah. So why am I emphasizing this? What's the reason you have to stop plowing at some point before Shemitah?
Because it might affect what happens on Shemitah itself.
Right, because if you don't, you're improving your work during Shemitah, right? If you don't stop, and that's why there are whole Mishnayot in Masechet Shvi'it that say exactly at what point in the year do you have to stop plowing for different vegetables, different grains, right? There's no sense in stopping the plowing for, I don't know, certain grains half a year before Shemitah. And more so, there are certain grains for which you have to stop plowing 3 months before, and other grains you have to stop plowing for, or vegetables you have to stop plowing for a month before. And stopping the plowing 3 months before for those vegetables is pointless, right? Because there's no chumrah to stop the plowing for the other vegetables 3 months before, just because you have to stop plowing for the grains 3 months before. So when we talk about the Tosefet here, we're not talking about making the time before Shemitah sanctified, right? More holy, like Shemitah. What we're saying is, you have to stop before Shemitah, otherwise you're utilizing the Shemitah, right? Same goes for the Katsir, obviously, right? Are you allowed to pick the fruit? So too, that could depend on, right? If the point there seems to be, you're not allowed to gain from the Shemitah, from what grew on Shemitah either, right? So this isn't the regular concept that we think of on Friday. Oh, you know what? I want to extend the Shabbos and decide at 5 o'clock in the afternoon that it's already Shabbos, right? Well, when does Shabbos start now? Earlier. Sorry. Now Shabbos starts around 5 o'clock, here at least. I don't know what times are in Canada, Rav Baruch. But here at least Shabbos starts around, Shkia now is like 5, right? Not sure because I don't remember exactly, but around then. So if I decide at 4 o'clock that it's Shabbos already, I'm just adding time long before Shkia, right? Here there's a specific goal, right? I'm not supposed to plow before Shemitah, because if I plow before Shemitah, I'm utilizing the land on Shemitah, and that's the prohibition. So,
wait, sorry. Can I ask, how does Rabbi Akiva tie this back to Shabbat? In your three dots here.
Step by step. The 3 dots are immaterial to your question. I'll answer that. It'll come up later on. It's a good point, right? Like I was saying, based on my analysis, it's very hard to derive from Shemitah to Shabbos, right?
Right, but we also didn't say that. He didn't say that yet.
He didn't say that, right? It could be, it very well may be that Rabbi Akiva doesn't hold Tosefet Shabbat on Shabbos in that sense. But I'll say another thing. Based on Rabbi Akiva, is there a way of extending the Kedusha of a certain day to the day before the previous day? There's no proof of that, right? There are 2 aspects I want to emphasize here in Rabbi Akiva. Well, number one, he isn't talking about extending the Kedusha. He's talking the ability of extending the Kedusha. He's only saying you have to not benefit from the land on Shemitah, and that includes doing things to allow you to utilize the land on Shemitah. Right? Does that that's not, it's not an option.
I don't see that he's saying specifically that you can't that it's for reasons because of the Shemitah. He's saying we're taking things that aren't allowed on Shemitah and we're making them not allowed also before and after Shemitah. So the same thing with Source Shabbat. You're taking the Surim they have on Shabbat and you're extending them to outside of Shabbat. And that way there is a similarity.
Okay, let me ask you, why does he say Chalish el Erev Shvit nichnas Shvit v'katzir Shvit yotzei l'motzei Shvit? What about the other way around? Is there a chumrah to stop plowing, to not start plowing after Shemitah?
So, okay, there is a connection to what it does, in terms of Isurei Shvit, but it is taking the Isurim that were on Shvit and extending them to the...
Right. So I agree with David then being a bit extreme here and saying, I think that you could definitely argue, and we'll see that some Rishonim will, you could definitely argue that Rabbi Akiva means to say, take these prohibitions and extend them. Again, is it only in the sense of utilizing the land, or is it also just extending the Yisur beyond the scope of the specific time frame? Sorry, not the scope, sorry, the specific time frame. All right, let's go on to Rabbi Ishmael and see what happens there. Rabbi Ishmael has a different drasha from Chodesh v'Katzer Tishbot. Where does he know Mosifim Mechol Kodesh Minale? How does he know? Nafka le midatanya v'nitem nafshodechem betish'a. Right, on Erev Yom Kippur. Yechol betish'a. Wait, you're not supposed to mitaneh on Erev Yom Kippur, you're supposed to mitaneh on Yom Kippur itself. Talmud lomar be'erev, nightfall. I be'erev, right, ha'ma'ariv aravim. We said Ma'ariv, right? Ma'ariv, so it's called Ma'ariv. I be'erev yechol mishetachshach only at nightfall. Talmud lomar betish'a, but then it's no longer the 9th day, right? It's no longer Tet Tishrei. HaKeitzad, matchilu mitaneh mib'od yom, melamed shemosifim mechol kodesh. So when do you start fasting? During the 9th, before nightfall. And this is how we know that you have to extend Yom Kippur to some time before. So the same applies to after Yom Kippur. Right, Tishbetu, sorry, Tishbetu Shabbatchem. Sorry, the pasuk is Me'er v'der Tishbetu Shabbatchem. So we learn why is Me'er v'der Tishbetu Shabbatchem, why is it mentioned Shabbos and Shvita so many times? To tell us that it's also Shabbos, it's also Yantiv. HaKeitzad kol makom she'esh bo shvut mosifim mechol al kodesh. That's the way Rabbi Ishmael learns everything. He derives that from this pasuk. Now, just to answer Yaakov's question, Tosefet say that Rabbi Akiva concurs. Rabbi Akiva v'yalif kulu mishvit Shabbat v'yom tov v'yom kippurim. The kulu mod Tosefet yom kippurim deoraita. So it seems that, at least according to Tosefet, Rabbi Akiva agrees with this analysis. Rabbi Akiva agrees with David's analysis. Because I'll explain what I mean. I was explaining Rabbi Akiva in a very certain way, and saying, all Rabbi Akiva is saying is that it mentions Chodesh v'Katzer twice to tell me you're not allowed to utilize the land during Shemitah in any way, even if that means prohibiting plowing before Shemitah or prohibiting plowing or prohibiting Katzil. What's the word for Katzil? It's in my mind.
Reaping.
Thank you. Yes, reaping the benefits of Shemitah post Shemitah, right? And David said, not necessarily. It could be just an extension of the prohibitions, and that's it. And that can apply to Shabbos and Yantiv as well. And Tosefet seems to take that direction, right? Tosefet say everyone agrees that, and in this way, right, there's no reason it shouldn't apply to everything else. By the way, I just want to point out, there's another extension that happened here. Yom Kippur, does it say in the limud that you're not allowed, that you have to start keeping Yisrei Melacha on Yom Kippur, before Yom Kippur? Right, it says V'initem nafshotechem specifically. But Tish'a is mentioned only in the context of V'initem nafshotechem. Everywhere else, it says Ba'asiri. Right? Ba'aso. Not Ba'asiri, Ba'aso. Right? When it mentions Shvita on Yom Kippur, it says Ba'aso. When it mentions Inui, it mentions Batish'a. You might say, yes, but those go together. You do it Yom Kippur, it's not, right? Just make up your mind. Definitely later on, if we extend this to Tishbetu and Shabbatchem, to Shabbos and Yantiv, right? If you want to extend this to Shabbos and Yantiv, it can't be referring to the chiyuv of fasting, right? If you want to extend from Kippur to Shabbos and Yantiv, it must be extending in terms of the sanctity of the day, I'd say, and the Shvita at least, but not fasting. But just pointing out all those aspects. So Tosefet takes this direction and says everyone agrees that everyone agrees that Shabbos, Yantiv, everything you have to extend the Yisrei Melacha before and after. The Rush follows suit. Tosefet Shabbat v'Yom Kippurim v'Yom Tovim Kai Malan Shiur Torah. They all hold it's D'oraisa. The Meiri disagrees. The Meiri says Tosefet Ze Yireh Sheino Ela Midivrei Sofrim. The Kai Asmachta Be'alma. Yesh Cholki Mima She'amru. B'tzad Aflamed. We're going to get to this Gemara later on. Tosefet Yom Kippurim D'oraita. Says the Gemara that we're talking about a D'oraita. It says D'oraita. אין הכרח בכך, וכבר מצאנו בהרבה מקומות בתלמוד, שקורא דברי סופרים דאורייתא, שהוא דבר שיש לעיקר שלו סרח מן התורה, אף על פי שאין אותו עניין מן התורה. וכן המחברים כולם לא הביאו בכלל מצוות עשה. No one mentions there's a mitzvah to start Shabbos or Yantiv or Yom Kippur before Yom Kippur. This is a very interesting point. I'm going to start from there are two interesting points in the Meiri as far as I'm concerned. Number one, he says all of this are smachtot. By the way, I think that follows my analysis of Rabbi Akiva. Right? If you follow David's analysis, you say you're taking the Isra and you extend the prohibitions to before and after Yom Kippur. Fine, fair. But if and then that means Shabbos, Yantiv, Yom Kippur, everything. You can extend those prohibitions, and you should extend those prohibitions to before and after. Fine. But the Meiri, I think, learns Rabbi Akiva as follows. He says Rabbi Akiva says you're not allowed to benefit from the land, not from plowing, not by plowing before, reaping after. But that's all benefiting and utilizing the land on Shemitah. It's a special prohibition that applies to Shemitah. It has nothing to do with Shabbos, especially since we don't hold Shvitat Kelim, right? I am allowed to have my washing machine run before Shabbos going into Shabbos, right? Again, I'm putting aside the questions of noise, etc. But mikaradin, I'm allowed to cook on Shabbos, as we learned, right? Cause cooking on Shabbos, obviously. So Rabbi Akiva is talking about Shemitah, where you're utilizing the land on Shemitah, but everything else is only Drabanan. It's all Kriyas Machta Ba'alma. And they want to have a pasuk to hang their coat on, right? A hook to hang the coat on, but it's not a real limud from the pasuk.
Do you think the Meiri thinks otherwise? B'shitat Rabbi Yishmael? Because otherwise it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the analysis of Rabbi Akiva. And Rabbi Yishmael seems to say explicitly that it's midoraita, and the Meiri still says that it's not.
That's a very good question. In order to answer that question, I want to analyze the Rambam. Before we analyze the Rambam, I want to point out one more thing about the Meiri, and then we'll go into the Rambam where we'll analyze your question. Center? The Meiri ends up with saying, you'll notice that no one mentions the mitzvah of adding time to Shabbos or Yantiv. Now that's an interesting point, because there are two ways of looking at this. We're learning this topic of kavod, ועונג, Shabbat, right? My assumption is that Tosefet Shabbat is part of kavod, ועונג, Shabbat, right? I need to respect, I need to honor, and I have to show my respect to Shabbos by doing different things, for example, by adding time. There are two ways of understanding. Again, Yaakov pointed out right away, there's the question of, must you add time? And the question of, may you? Is it possible? Does it work? So setting that issue aside for a moment, when I say that Shabbos actually begins 20 minutes before Yom Kippur, so Yom Kippur seems to be quite clear. Yom Kippur starts on the 9th, on Tetz Tishrei, right? On the 9th, not on the 10th. There are two ways of looking at that. One way of looking at it is, you thought it starts at nightfall. No, actually it starts 45 minutes earlier. Whatever, right? I'll start from the other way. The other way of looking at it is, it starts at nightfall, but I expect you to come earlier. I expect you to start earlier. You see the difference in those two? In other words, is the mitzvah to honor Shabbos and Yom Kippur by beginning earlier than the time, right? If I schedule a meeting with someone, he respects me, and he feels, if you're going to meet the president of the United States, we don't know who that is right now, but if you were to go to meet him, I imagine that you'd make sure to be there early, not on time. You'd come early, right? Because you want to honor the setting, that this opportunity, right? Part of honoring people, part of honoring things is coming early. How early, that doesn't matter. The point is come early. That's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is Shabbos doesn't start at nightfall. Shabbos starts half an hour before nightfall. Why am I emphasizing this in the context of the Meiri? Because the Meiri ends up with saying, no one mentioned this mitzvah of adding time. When you say there's a mitzvah of adding time, what you're saying is that that I expect if Shabbos really starts at nightfall, I expect you to add more because you really know to honor Shabbos, and in honor of Shabbos, you should come early. If the whole Tosefet Shabbat and Tosefet Yom Kippur, let's talk about Yom Kippur, that's the easy one, right? This one that seems quite explicit. If the pasuk is just saying Yom Kippur actually starts at 4 o'clock, not at 5, not at 4:45, it starts at 4. So that's just a time frame. There's no mitzvah. There's no mitzvah to start adhering to Yom Kippur. Let's ask, if a person eats after the time of Tosefet Yom Kippur, what Isur did he do? Let's assume it's Doraisa. Let's say a person eats till the last minute. What Isur did he do? One of two options. Either he transgressed Kavod Yom Kippur, or he ate on Yom Kippur. Because Yom Kippur, in fact, does not start at nightfall, it starts half an hour before. Right?
But then you need another Tosefet for that, because if it actually starts then you're going back and having another Tosefet, you need, it's supposed to be a Tosefet. So
when I say no,
but I think if it was if there was a mitzvah, if it was Doraita, there'd be a Shiur. What's the Shiur? How much time for you to be mamash chayev? And the fact that there isn't a Shiur makes it look like a mirror.
You're assuming there isn't a Shiur. We just haven't reached that part of our Shiur. That'll come up. All right, that'll come up over here. You're right. But I just want to make that point clear. When the Meiri says no one mentions there's such a mitzvah, he's saying something very interesting, right? He's assuming it is a mitzvah. Whereas you can just say it's a time frame. When I read the pasuk, when I read the pasuk and I say, "But Shabbat be'erev me'erev v'derev," what I see is it says start on the time that's technically Tet Tishrei, possibly as David said, specifically 25 minutes before Shkia, whatever it is, right? Specific time. And then it's just a matter of time frame. It just means that Yom Kippur starts earlier. Now, another difference between these two is, does it work? Because if I bring the source that says Yom Kippur starts, in fact, 25 minutes before nightfall, not at nightfall, 25 minutes before. Okay, can I choose to start Yom Kippur an hour before? Presumably, there would be no relationship between these two questions, right? Again, if I say there's a mitzvah to add time, how much? Lo yoda, as David said, there's a mitzvah to add time. How much? Lo yoda. A mitzvah, add time. I don't know how much, right? And then I say, okay, so you add 18 minutes, you add 2 minutes, and I add an hour and a half. It's all good. You came early. It doesn't matter how early you came, presumably. I mean, maybe it might be you can't start on Wednesday, but right, as long as within the a time frame that's relevant, right? So that should work, right? It should work because the mitzvah is add some time, and then we'd say two things. First of all, how much? I don't know, whatever is appropriate, How much do you need to mechabed Shabbat? How much wine do you have to drink on Shabbos as Kvod Shabbat? How much meat do you have to eat on Shabbos Kvod Shabbat? I don't know. If you rejoice more, if you sing more Zmirot, so that's more. And if you sing less, so it's less, whatever. But you need to do something, right? Same would be here. You can add 2 minutes, you can add 20 minutes, you can add 2 hours. That shouldn't really make much of a difference. If the point is there's a time frame, if the issue is the Batisha, we're just saying, what I mean is it starts 25 minutes before Yom Kippur and ends 20 minutes after Yom Kippur. So that's just a time frame thing, right? That would also be more similar to the way I analyze Rabbi Akiva, by the way, right? As I said before, according to Rabbi Akiva, there's no reason to stop plowing your field 6 months before. And in fact, for certain crops, it would be relevant to stop 6 weeks before. Other crops would not be relevant until 4 weeks before. And there's no point in stopping to plow 6 weeks before for the other crops, right?
What would define, by the way, what would define starting it earlier? Is it the sulim or the candle lighting or both? Is it like
that's a good question. That's the next one after, right? How do you add that time? Assuming you can, which we know you can. But we'll get to that later on. I just wanted to point that out because it's a very interesting concept here. The Meiri says, I know it's not Doraisa because no one says there's such a mitzvah. Now, they might say it's not a mitzvah, it's just a time frame. Right, just pointing that out. Now let's go to the Rambam. The Rambam says the following, and he only says the following. There's more to learn from what the Rambam didn't write in this case than what the Rambam did write. The Rambam wrote the following. צריך להוסיף מחול על הקודש בכניסתו וביציאתו, שנאמר, והנתם לשודכם בתשעה לחודש בערב, כלומר, התחל לצום ולהתענות מערב תשעה סמוך לעשירי. וכן ביציאה שוהה בעינויו מעט מלילי 11, סמוך לעשירי, שנאמר מערב עד ערב תשבתו שבתכם. Now, he does not mention this anywhere else except for in הלכות שביתת הסוהר, which is הלכות יום כיפור.
Yom Kippur.
Right, so he
also talks about it as inui, like you said.
Right, and that's why I emphasized. So on the one hand, he started with saying Tzalosiv Mechol Kodesh, which sounds general, but then he writes, what does pasuk mean? It means Hatchel Latzum Leitanot. And V'chetzia Shohe B'inuyo. What about Isurei Melacha? Not mentioned. Now, you might say there are two ways of reading this Rambam. One way is to say, the Rambam is saying you have to add Mechol Kodesh in all senses. How do I know this? Because the pasuk that talks about fasting, and how do I interpret the pasuk? The interpretation of the pasuk is start fasting before and finish fasting and end your fasting after. And obviously, it means in all other senses it's Yom Kippur for all intents and purposes. That's one way of reading the Rambam. Another way of reading the Rambam is it only applies to fasting, because that's why he mentions fasting, right? 4 times here he mentions fasting. Why? To make it clear, we're talking about fasting. We're not talking about anything else. That's why the Magid Mishnah explains it. שאין תוספת דבר תורה אלא בעינוי. אבל לא בעשיית מלאכה, לא ביום כיפור ולא בשבת. וזה מה שכתב, מתחיל לצום ולהתענות. That's why the Rambam keeps on mentioning fasting over and over again. Why? To make it clear, I'm only talking about fasting. And therefore, זהו שלא נזכר בדבריו בהלכות שבת, ותוספת כלל מן התורה. Doesn't mention this in Chot Shabbat at all. Why not? There's no fasting on Shabbat. Now, the Beit Yosef makes things worse, because if you read the end here, you say, there's לא נזכר בדבריו בהלכות שבת תוספת כלל מן התורה. That sounds very much like the Meiri, right? The Meiri, you said it's all Drabanan. So he says, okay, so only news Doraisa, everything else is Drabanan. Says the Beit Yosef, no. משמע דבר תורה שכתב לאו דווקא מדרבנן נמי לילי תוספת, אם לא כן, לא היה לו להשמיטו. Nope. It's even that is not Doraisa. It doesn't even apply to Drabanan. In other words, according to the Rambam, the only chiyuv you have in terms of Tosefet is to add fasting on Yom Kippur. Zeu, setu, nothing else. According to the Rambam, there's no other chiyuv to add. Now, the Levush disagrees and explains the Rambam differently. That there is Tosefet as Drabanan. I didn't copy the whole Levush, but if you see inside, you see he's explaining the Rambam. He's interpreting the Rambam. He understands that there are basically 3 ways. Why did the Rambam write this like this? Why did the Rambam write it like this? One way is this is the source. This is the source. Is the source, so that's why he mentioned Inui over and over again, because he's interpreting the pasuk. So he explained the pasuk. It says v'initem, so he mentions v'initem. That's what it says in the pasuk. But really it applies to everything. There's the way the Radvaz explains. אני בעוני אומר שאין זה הכרח לשבוי פלוגתא בין הפוסקים, מה שלא כתבו אותו בהלכות שבת, משום שתלמוד קבע אותה לעניין יום כיפור. כל שכן עניין שבת, שזה בכרת, זה מיתה בידי אדם. So the original pasuk was in the context of Yom Kippur. Shabbos is more chomer than Yom Kippur, because Shabbos is an Isur Skila and Yom Kippur is only correct. And therefore, if it applies to Yom Kippur, it applies to everything. And he says, it says over here, the way the Radvaz reads the Rambam, Tzalosiv Mechol Kodesh. Always. Always, I mean, every Shabbos, every Yom Tiv, every Yom Kippur. How do I know? I know because of the pasuk that talks about Inui. Fine. But from there, they learn Kal V'chomer. If it applies to Inui Yom Kippur, it has to apply to Isur Melacha on Shabbos, and therefore it should also apply to all other Isur Melacha. That's where the Radvaz learns. So that's why I'm saying there are three ways of learning the Rambam. Way number one is the Beit Yosef, who says only Inui on Yom Kippur, period. Nothing else exists. The Levush, who says only Inui on Yom Kippur is Doraisa, but all other Tosefot, Shabbat and Yontiv and Yom Kippur are Drabanan. Way number three is the Radvaz over here, who says that the source is Yom Kippur, but really there's a Chiyuv Doraisa in all Shabbos, Yom Kippur, and everything.
Wait, and what about what's and everything? Because the Kal V'chomer doesn't work to Yom Tov.
Good point. I don't want to go deeply into that, but I'll send you the Archavot. Is that okay?
Sure.
He says over here, no, you think I'm sending you off the Archavot, but you see in the parentheses over here. So either you cheated and looked at the question, or I cheated and had the question quickly. Now stop. I'm joking. I know you logged up. So right. When it comes to other things, right. So there's discussion there in the Archavot. It's a fair point. So I just want to point out. Let's sum up the shitot, and then I want to point out, and then I want to try to explain what's the Maggid actually saying here. So what we've seen so far is we have the Tosefot and the Rush, and I'll tell you also most posts can understand the Rif as well, say all of these Tosefot are D'oraita. The Meiri says they're all Drabanan. The Rambam, three opinions. Opinion number one is that it's all Doraisa. Start from the end. Radvaz says all of him, everything's Doraisa. That's the Radvaz. Opinion number two is the Levush, who says Inu is Doraisa, everything else is Drabanan. And the Beit Yosef, and presumably it seems also the Maggid Mishnah, Inu is Doraisa, everything else does not exist as a Chiyuv. Lehalacha. Let's have a quick look at Shulchan Aruch and Yeli Rabbah. Shulchan Aruch says Yeshom Shtzol Asim B'Chol Kodesh, doesn't really explain much. Yeli Rabbah, we'll start from the Be'ur Halacha, that who says everything is at least Drabanan, right? He seems to go to also interpret the Rambam like the Levush, right? Earlier Rabbah says that he thinks it's Doraisa, like the Rif and the Rush, and the Rambam don't necessarily disagree. Now I want to just say something about the Maggid Mishnah. Why would this be? Why would Inui be the only thing that's Doraisa? What's the sense in that? So it used to be a bit of an anomaly to me, like specifically Inui out of everything else. And I guess Yom Kippur is just a bit strange, it has its own special dinim that don't apply anywhere else. So so you can kind of expect that things will be different there. My father told me a Zohar that I think that helped me understand, and you're going to say, oh, we're going to Kabbalah, don't worry. This is a very, very Lamdish Zohar. The Zohar says the following. It says in the pasuk about Yom Kippur, be'etzim. What's the pasuk? Sorry, slipped my. I had it. Right. Exactly. Exactly. Thank you. You've read that enough times, right? From the Torah. I've heard you reading that from the Torah enough times. Right. So you see the Inui has to be done be'etzem hayom hazeh. Asks the Zohar, right? Midrash Tanaim. Why do we need be'etzem hayom hazeh? What other day? Why would I think another day? The pasuk. There are enough psukim previously that tell me when to fast. So why do I have to be told you have to fast on this day, on this specific day? I got it. This day. I get it. Why do you have to write be'etzem? The Zohar says the following. You'd think, and this is Inkvar, we're mentioning people who have jobs on Yom Kippur. Anyone here who's been a chazan on Kol Nidrei knows that, lo name lomar, but Kol Nidrei is the davening that you go to the bathroom the most. right? As a chazan, you have to find those times where you have to, right? Why? Because you ate all day, you drank all day, you come the most, right? You come into that. There's no other davening in the year that you made sure to eat and drink quite as much right before. So we're standing there and we're saying to Hashem that we're fasting, and you have a very full stomach, right? So says the Zohar, you'd think that you should start fasting from Chatzot the previous day. And then you start fasting effectively when Yom Kippur starts. Because we don't really feel hungry on Yom Kippur until, 10 a.m., right? Let's be honest. When you really start feeling, you don't feel hungry that night. You ate enough during the day. You start feeling hungry the next morning, you missed breakfast, then you start feeling hungry. But until then, maybe not so fast either, but I'm saying definitely not before you miss breakfast the next morning, right? So is that really inui on Yom Kippur? So that's why you'd think that you should start fasting 6 hours before. Says the pasuk, be'etzem hayom hazeh. You have to, the inui happens only on Yom Kippur itself. Why is this important for our context? What am I saying? In a way, this connects to what I was saying about Rabbi Akiva over here. Right? Rabbi Akiva says you need to stop plowing before Shemitah. Why? Otherwise, you're utilizing the land on Shemitah. Right? When the Rambam says you have to add time to Yom Kippur, he's not saying like the Zohar, but if you hold like the Magid Mishnah, the Beit Yosef, and you say this applies only to Tosefet of fasting, only Tosefet of Inui, maybe what he means is, if you stop eating a second before Yom Kippur, so you'll say, why aren't you eating now? It's Yom Kippur. Why aren't you eating now because Yom Kippur? No, you're not eating now because you just ate. So of course you're not eating. Why are we not eating now? Because right now we're not hungry, right? I mean, I'm assuming. Right? Otherwise you guys would be eating. I'm stopping you. Why aren't you eating, all of you? Presumably either you ate something before you, after, right? You don't need to eat every minute. So when you get into Yom Kippur and you had a big feast a second before, and then you start Yom Kippur and you say, I'm fasting. You're not really fasting. You stop half an hour before Shkia, you have a good 45 minutes between when you stop eating and when you start the davening, then something happened before Yom Kippur starts, right before Shkia. Then something happened. Then you can say, I started fasting. Otherwise, the fact itself loses its effectivity, right? There's no... And that's why what I'm going to propose is a svara to explain why would fasting be the only thing that has to start half an hour before that you have Tosefet before, like Tosefet Shabbat and Tosefet Yom Kippur only applies to fasting, not even to the other Isurim on Yom Kippur. For this reason, because other Isurim Melacha, you have to stop on Yom Kippur. Fasting, you need to stop a bit before and not start until a bit after to make Yom Kippur effective, just like we said about the Shemitah, to make that